So basically what you're talking about is there seems to be an alliance between, for lack of a better word, the so-called Illuminati group that is satanic followers, and the P45s, what you call the P45s, and the Majestic group, which, even though it has some members from the Illuminati, basically is siding with the P52s.
Yeah, I wouldn't really call them I would say that they are Freemasons who have accepted the Luciferian influence. In other words, I personally disagree with it. The Luciferian influence, but are still acting as good people.
For the benefit of humanity.
For the benefit of humanity, exactly. And then there are some that I've interacted with who are involved with the so-called true Illuminati in Europe that are God-fearing people too. There's dirty coins and there's polished coins on both sides. However, the dirty coins make up the vast majority of the group on the European Illuminati side.
Okay. So what is, now let's get to the timelines and explain just briefly, since this gets over into the future and 2012, what the P45s, meaning they are from the future, 45,000 years ahead of...
45,000 years ahead on a separate timeline than what we are presently on, or a timeline that we could transition over to from where we are now. So, if we are to accept that we transition, God forbid, from timeline 1 to timeline 2, they would be considered 45,000 years and 52,000 years, respectively, ahead of us. The individuals who dumped near Roswell, New Mexico, back in the 40s, were approximately 24,000 years ahead of us in timeline 2. And that was a mission return, an Earth-to-Earth time travel mission.
That we're on timeline 1, I'm assuming you're saying, and we're headed for 2012, and theoretically a catastrophe that may or may not happen.
Right around now, yeah.
Right around now?
Yeah.
And this catastrophe, has this got anything to do with Planet X?
I don't know. There is the most honest answer I can provide you. I know of a lot of lore about a rogue planet coming in. However, the material that I've actually seen on a repetitive crossing, if you will, of Earth with catastrophic influences happens not only because of a matter of physics, of rogue, and I don't mean this toward like J-Rod rogue, but rogue crossings near Earth asteroids or comets. What I have heard is that to precipitate the catastrophe, there would be, as we pass into the plane of the Milky Way, some sort of energetic burst through the plane of the galaxy by virtue of wormholes that travel through the plane of the galaxy from the center of the galaxy, which have been depicted in ancient lore called the serpent rope, even of the ancients. And that the serpent rope would return at the time of the end of the Mayan calendar, revealing, and there are several perspectives as to what it will reveal. But that during this same time, the history of the J-Rods record that this burst will cause a disruption in the sun, and that concomitantly with energetic bursts from the sun and from the wormholes which would be passing through our planet, that there would be a disaster provoked by virtue of these time travel devices, the Stargate devices, and the time viewing devices, the looking glass devices, spontaneously turning on and directing an inappropriate amount of energy into the crust of the Earth, precipitating a geophysical disaster. This geophysical disaster, in accordance with the history of the J-Rods, the Orions, record that over 4,157,000,000 die over a several-year period by virtue of a geophysical shift in the crust.
So this is what is trying to be
numb when I think of numbers that way.
Is trying to be prevented. Is this right?
Yes. Very true.
And how is it going to be prevented?
By the disabling and the destruction of such technology, that we will naturally then pass through this serpent ropes. The bursts will occur, whatever that means. I don't know, I haven't physically seen it. But the bursts will occur, and there would be an imparting of energy to our planet that will gradually, naturally cause changes in the human species and the life on our planet. And that these changes would be positive changes to our people. And I frankly think that it's already happening. There's a rise worldwide and I don't think it's just given the size of the population increase. But there is a rise in very spiritual, talented people. There is a rise in savants, the indigo children. It's definitely, from what I've seen from reading about them, a real phenomenon. These children are of a new time, and I think they're of the timeline time. We're seeing, I think, in these children, these great kids, an expression of what we will be in our own future, our next kind of step ahead. You're not looking millions of years ahead or anything like that, but our next step ahead. And it's a wonderful rise in consciousness that I think will precipitate the next renaissance for our people. I see it happening. The numbers that we received before the looking glass was shut down, dismantled, was that there would be a 19% probability with an 85% confidence that the disaster would occur, that there would be a transitioning from timeline 1 to timeline 2. But that then means that there is an 81% chance that it won't. And so the individuals who want to carry the negative, I'm convinced that it's going to occur, are not presenting the facts. The facts are, this is the material that we have available, that we know.
So what you're saying is the Illuminati, to get back to that thread,
yes,
is basically the side that believes that the transition is going to occur from one timeline to the other.
Not only do they believe that it will occur, they want to provoke it.
But how does it benefit them to provoke it? Why should they want to be P45s?
They don't. The living ones don't. They're looking at the P45s as a means to an end for them. They're not going to live that long. They're just going to live a normal human life and die. So they want the control for themselves. The fact that the P45s, that's how immoral these people are. The fact that the P45s are wanting us to, at their stage in their own development, have a disaster which justifies their own history, is being used as a means to an end by the Illuminati, who would like to see that the population is culled so that they can gain greater control. They don't care.
So, okay, so
they just want for themselves. There are really human beings that don't care, or that care that little.
So what you're saying is the Illuminati want the catastrophe to occur,
yes,
so that a certain number, 3/4 is the number I've heard, of humanity dies, they
Well,
get the earth
history
to
reads
themselves.
about a little over 2/3. That's what the history
Okay,
of the J-rods
2/3.
actually read.
All right, 2/3. And then what? I mean, they've still had to live through earth changes and cataclysms, right?
Right. But these people are also the ones who have their guaranteed positions in the safety zones, underground facilities, etc. And so they are presumed. It is not known for certain, but they are presumed to actually then be the progenitors, if you will, of the people who become the J-rods.
Understand. But in a sense, there is a thought that, in a sense, the P45s, that side of humanity possibly becomes almost soulless.
They become repressed. They still have their same souls, because even after 7,000 more years of development, I could see the soul. I mean, as you see the heart of another human being, I could see the soul in Kaela. So it didn't.
But Kaela was not
back.
a P45.
No, he was a P52. But that just means that he was 7,000 years along the T2 timeline from when the P45s
So
were
he
in
used
existence.
to be, or his people used to be a P45.
Yes.
And a P46, 47, 48.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the soul didn't go away and then come back. It's been there. But then, you know what? Look, you can say that some people are soulless. The Nazis. How much soul did they have when they threw my grandpa onto a car? How much soul did they have? We know what they had, a human soul. As black as apparently what it was, or as covered over in their demented brains. But I still pray for them that even them, that they've been made whole with God. But they still had their souls, even though it was repressed.
So,
in like manner, the P45s have a soul.
Okay. Well then, okay, you've talked about the P52 Orions and the P52 J-rods. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What causes the split? Because the Orions, I'm thinking, are the blonde Nordics.
They're the ones that prefer to stay out of the safety zones when it happens. They are the survivors who do not go underground.
Are these good? Is this a good division of humanity? I mean, the P52 Orion
I don't consider any
Nordics.
division of humanity good. I consider them the more positive of the two, because I consider the positive aspects of humanity to be the spiritual aspects.
So you're saying the Nordic line is spiritual?
Yeah,
More
extremely,
spiritual.
extremely, yeah.
Okay. So how does the Nordic line, I mean, you say they stay out.
They actually move off from Earth first. The J-rods, or the precursors to the J-rods, stay on Earth for a great deal of time. Well after 24,000 years from the time of the transition, like 24,000 years from now, because there were 24 or so thousand years ahead of us when they crashed in Roswell in 1947. Those were 24s. They stay. The Orions move off first to the place after the reestablishment of a society on the surface of the Earth. Technology is refurbished, etc. They move off to the place where the Ark is held.
Which is where?
Our nearest body, the Moon.
The Moon.
Where on it, I'm not going to say.
Okay. Well, this
Because I'm
gets
having
into...
to defend against the possibility of Timeline 1 transitioning over to Timeline 2 in a manner different than I've been told. And I'm not going to be the person who hands off the wrong information.
So, okay, but you're saying the Nordics are going to get off Earth if the catastrophe happens, or regardless,
They leave after.
after the catastrophe happens.
Presumably several thousand years after it happens. They
Several
leave.
thousand years.
Yes,
I
they
was
move
getting
to
the
moon.
impression you were talking
not
about them
really.
going on spaceships or something.
No. They move off to the moon several thousand years via spacecraft. They get to the place where the Ark was held, and they reestablish a new community. From there, they move to Mars. From Mars out to Orion.
So
Talking a lot of time here.
the face on Mars is this? Are we looking at something that was left behind by the Nordics?
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking
as best
forward.
as I know.
We're looking forward to our future when we're looking at the ruins.
Yeah, we're looking at a paradox of their ruins, which they left on another planet.
In our future.
In our future.
In our possible future.
Yep.
Okay, well, to come back to this
She's
future...
actually got the best command of this information of anyone in the public with whom I've spoken.
I know. Thank you. That's a very sweet thing to say.
It's honest.
Thank you. We've got I'm getting another question here from our small audience, and I must say that Bill Ryan is...
Bill O'Ryan? I mean Ryan?
Bill Ryan is also sitting with me and listening to this amazing information and asking some good questions.
When we're looking at Mars, are we therefore looking at the future?
Now the question is this.
I just don't understand that.
The question of the day is that what is going to happen? What is going to happen when the transition occurs and we either continue on one or, God forbid, number two happens? If number two happens, we're not going to be worried about Mars. We will have much more important things to worry about at that moment. Let's say, God willing, and I think we will, remain on timeline 1. What's going to happen with our imagery of Mars? I think we'll probably remember taking images of these anomalous structures. And there have been some anomalous structures imaged on the moon as well. So I think we're probably going to remember that. At least I think so. If we don't, it's not going to matter now, is it?
So what you're saying is we're going to go back to the idea that there is no face on Mars.
Or there will be a face on Mars, and it will be presented to us at that moment as something different. Maybe the bricks will turn to rocks, and we will get there and find out that all of these beautiful ruins, including the scorpion. If you don't think it's a scorpion, tell me what it is. Okay, I'll show you the images from Star City on the top of this pyramid. If it's not a scorpion, tell me what it is. But perhaps we're going to get there and we're going to find out that all of this presumed architecture that we are seeing by virtue of the geometry that we're attempting to apply to these images is nothing more than rocks. That we've never been there. Because at that moment, because we had not transited over to timeline 2, that we have never visited there until we finally put, quote unquote, man on Mars.
But there's a profound paradox here, because
there is.
Because what I hear you saying is that we're looking through telescopes where we're receiving light in present time with a few minutes difference. That's being reflected off objects on the surface of Mars, but we're actually looking at a possible future.
That's right.
I don't understand.
There are impacts into our timeline now which have occurred. This is information that I received not only from CAMELOT, but also from the material within Majestic. There are impacts into our reality now, our timeline now, by virtue of the amount of time travel which has occurred. Every time they have gone back in time, they have caused small paradoxes which have built up as our reality that we now perceive. In other words, there is actual Newtonian superimposing. And that is a frightening thing to me.
So it's almost like putting money in the bank, though, every time they come from the P45s, in a sense. Their timeline becomes...
as creating a larger heap of manure.
Well, okay, but emphasis appreciated. However, nonetheless, it is like a deposit towards the actual occurrence happening.
I don't know.
They are agents of change, in a sense.
They are agents of change, as all human beings are agents of change. But I don't know whether there is a cause-effect, whether there's a nexus between cause and effect having to do with their amount of time travel and the superimposition which is going on in our reality and the disaster itself. I think that the disaster itself, from everything that I've read and heard, is a direct consequence of the technological aspect of bringing too much energy toward us in a non-natural manner.
Okay, well, basically, you're saying there's two timelines. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the work of physicists now that are saying, look, if you can have two timelines, you can have 2 million.
Well, don't we really have 3 or 4? I'm discussing 24,000s, I'm discussing 45,000s, 52,000s, and present day. How many timelines are that? Because these people moved ahead linearly in their timeline. Just because we want to call it timeline 2 doesn't mean that there are other effects or superimposings which are occurring on different realities during even their own timelines.
Exactly. I mean, there's a sense at which what you're talking about is not so much that the P45s, for example, timeline won't exist, as it will actually separate from our reality and become more like a parallel reality instead of an intersecting one.
From what I understand, the people who were just prior, which would be us, according to their history, to the people who were just after, exist as a straight vector of time. So in other words, God forbid the catastrophe occur, it will just appear as tomorrow the catastrophe occurs, etc., and we move forward and changes start occurring in the earth. There is a disaster, there's a loss of huge life, etc. We won't probably feel anything change aside from the fact that we'll all be running scared for our lives. Aside from that, I have no explanation.
Okay, you're saying if the catastrophe occurs.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't occur, there's still the element in which we have been visited by a timeline in which really does exist in a sense. And how do you unmake something which has been made? That's kind of, I mean, it's more of a philosophical question.
I don't know, and all I can do is defer to the Creator on that issue. Because all we do is perturb.
What has told you that this is true?
All of the above.
Okay.
It's all of the above, plus information directly from Majestic. I think.
Why is Majestic in a place to know that this actually happens or doesn't happen? In other words, you've got the looking glass technology that they use and you use, and you're instrumental in discovering. Were you in?
No. This is an original technology which was derived from ancient cylinder seals by people from our future who provided it to us, meaning the rogues, the P45s.
Okay, the people from our negative future.
That's right. We wouldn't have this lovely technology if it wasn't planted in our past for us to use now. The entirety of the technology must either be disabled or destroyed.
In other words, to unmake the technology.
Until at least after we pass through this time period. There is no way, from the deceit, the conceit, the avarice, and the greed that I have been around over the last 20 years amongst the good side of these two dirty coins. There is no way that they're not going to start this equipment back up again if it's usable after this. Of course they're going to. Come on. I mean, they've got this, it's like a magic box to try to see into the future. What they're going to do with our future with regard to that, I've got no clue. I have no power over it, and I have no clue.
Okay, so this looking glass technology comes from cylinder seals.
Originally, yes.
How?
Originally, it was a series of instructions for accessing the wormholes which naturally pass in the hyperspace in which we find ourselves. And from there, they worked on the technology. They built the equipment from the instructions. After building the equipment from the instructions, they began to tweak it and find different things out about it. One of the things that they found is that they could actually use it as a peering portal, like a peering glass, if you will, to see different aspects of not only the future but the past.
Are these Sumerian? I
would say that they slightly predate Sumerian time frame, but that some of the information which came down from cylinder seals that slightly predated the Sumerian time frame were then recopied in Sumerian seals as well. And those cylinder seals, oh yes, and those cylinder seals, to the best of my knowledge, have all been obtained.
From Iraq?
Some of them from Iraq, yes.
Some of them from Egypt?
Some of them from Egypt, some of them from other countries where they were being stored. And I really don't want to get my country into too many problems here.
And you've got, go ahead.
For a second, I want to reiterate, the Rogue P-45s jumped back, seeded this technology, because that's what they wanted to do, was to seed the land to help facilitate the catastrophe. Because by placing this technology available, they knew that it would be utilized, and as long as we as people, oh my God, they wanted to go back and seed the technology, because they felt that as people we would be unable to break ourselves away from using that technology.
How is it that this technology is being utilized now? And isn't, if you're talking about a wormhole, isn't it the same thing as a Stargate?
Essentially, yes. The technology is not being utilized now. Anywhere we find it, we take it.
Who's we? Because you have warring factions. You've got the Illuminati on one hand. You've got the Majestic on another.
We as the United States as part of the UN. NATO. I don't really want to comment too much about NATO and who's controlling the NATO alliance at this point. But
isn't it a fact that the Illuminati would be stealing back this looking? I mean, if they want it to happen, their objective would be to steal these cylinders and get them on, so that they could use the looking glass technology.
They can't show up as an aggressor to steal anything back. So what they do is they vote against us.
How does that stop looking glass technology?
It plays out in the UN. We had looking glass technology and portal, actual Stargate technology, in Iraq as late as the start of 2003. And a lot of countries didn't want us to enter Iraq. We did, though, didn't we?
Right. But how is it that, in other words, it sounds like...
Omar just handed his two over. We just told him that we were going to make him rich beyond avarice. And he was a little smarter than Saddam, that's all. And so what he did is he handed them over and says, "Oh, please come into my country." He says, look at my equipment to make sure that I'm not making any weapons of mass destruction. Meanwhile, out the back door goes the two that Saddam actually had transferred over to him.
Cylinders.
Equipment. Stargate. Activating technology.
Portal.
Yeah, for them to experiment with. They were experimenting.
But if the looking glass technology is the same thing, is accesses a wormhole. The technology accesses a wormhole.
Yes.
It also accesses stargates.
Well, that's essentially the same thing. I've been using the term Stargates technology as meaning a machine that accesses a wormhole by spreading out the energy, the strange matter, or whatever it is, and I'm not a physicist, that spreads it out in a compatible way to either communicate through it or passage of information. And that includes also...
But it occurs naturally. Stargates occur naturally.
Indeed they do.
So how do you close those?
You don't, and we don't want to. We don't want to. The history reads that the natural passage of us through this energetic space is a good thing. But it's our use of technology which provokes the catastrophe.
So it's
our enhancement of this natural system, inappropriate enhancement, which provokes the catastrophe. And so, no, we don't want that to happen. I think that the energetics that we're passing through is part of what's happening to us naturally that's changing us in a positive way. It's part of the loving cosmos that we're part of. I think that's probably one of the factors, not all, but one of the factors for the rise of these beautiful children, the indigo children. And I'm all for it.
So we want to leave the stargates, the natural stargates. They are leaving those alone.
Right. We want to keep our hands up from nature. Pull our hands away. Get it away from the fruit of the tree of life, so to speak. Get it away and just let nature happen during this time. That will be a good thing. However, we also have people who oppose that because they want what they want.
Okay, so tell us about...
okay, well, the Men in Black phenomenon.
The Men in Black, yeah.
Part of it is a psychological operations unit within Majestic. And they operate to scare people away from things that they've seen that they don't want them, further bringing information out in the population of the so-called giggle factor. Anything above that, they attempt or have attempted, I don't even know that they're still in operation, to suppress. Then you have the real McCoy. The real McCoy is not human. The real McCoy is in fact a P-45J rod. They are using, through the use of some sort of sinuous biomechanical technology, the skin of a dead human.
Wow.
It is a dead human. These are the ones that walk up to you and they look like they're shuffling, like they've just filled their drawers. When they speak through this technology that they have wrapping around them, they sound very bland, very monotone, and they don't belong. You can tell very quickly that they don't belong.
Have you met one?
I've met several of them. They were operating around my work at Sunchase before we were moved to a different location. Yes, they're very sallow in appearance. They thought that it was an appropriate expression to sing me happy birthday one year over at, I think it was the start of 2003. It was either 03 or 04. 03, I believe it was. Yeah. And I did not like being around them, and they will not think twice but to use force on you. They will hit you. They will push you. One did me. Marcia, not that long ago, got her fill of both types. Both the psychological operations people who attempted a few years ago to scare her off over at Winchester Park. Those were human beings. They were just striking fear in her. And one actual real McCoy nib. And this thing, I actually saw it first. It wandered onto, they get confused easily. That's a good thing. Wandered onto our property at, where we're presently living. And I was walking home from her apartment at the time, and I thought a child was swinging on the swing. There's a swing set out in front of my apartment. The closer I got, I thought that it was a little older kid wearing black. Then I noticed it had a hat on. And he said, "Swing, fun." He was lost in a memory, apparently, of the person that he was wearing. And I looked at him and got very afraid inside because they carry weapons. They can be killed with weapons too. He was not supposed to be on our property. Our security did not do its real job. We're not worried about the two-legged real humans that just walk around. It's these things.
So he was the size of a child? Is that what you're saying?
No, he was. I thought it was a child on the swing set as I was walking up. He was past dusk. It was dark out there.
So he was a normal size?
He was a normal size
man,
Yep.
full-grown person.
Yep. Yeah, he was wearing all black and a black preacher's type hat, round brimmed.
How do you get rid of him?
Well, how do you get rid of
Yeah.
him? Well, it would be very good if a person could actually. I've got to be careful suggesting that because they are still human beings. They took him into security. Ultimately, took him into custody. Just want to be careful, liability-wise, of making a suggestion on how to get rid of one of them. But
people could miscue, and,
Right.
and we wouldn't want to have a problem.
no, say, well, Dr. Burisch said do this or that. There shouldn't be that many walking around to worry about. But and it wasn't even sent there to deal with me. It was sent there to deal with her. And it found itself apparently lost in a memory in the swing set. And I said, good, swing to it. And inside I'm going, oh, shit. Walked in, keyed the door to my apartment, pressed the emergency button for security, hoping then that they were going to respond. Went in and told my mother-in-law what was going on. She looked out of the window and said, yep. She's been in the Majestic family all of her life. She said, yep. Then the oldest got up, looked out the window and said, that's what one looks like. It was her first experience seeing one. I said, yeah. And I said, Doris, go over here. And I unlocked something and I pulled something out for her. And I said, while I leave here, because I'm going to do the hurt bird routine, lead it away. Because, I mean, there was 3 kids in there. I said, I don't know what its intention is. It may have a lethal intention here, and it's just presently lost. As soon as it gets done swinging, it may pull a weapon out. I said, so if it comes near here, defend yourself and defend the kids. Meanwhile, I'm going to grab something else. Yes, I grabbed a weapon, and I'm going to try to lead it away. By the time I had the second weapon out and was armed, it was walking off already toward her apartment's direction. So I said, okay, well, I still have to get it in case it turns around, because if it knows where I went into the apartment, I have to lead it away because there are kids in here. There's little girls in here. And so I walked toward it, past it, walked clear by it, and it just continued shuffling ahead slowly up the sidewalk, gradually toward her apartment. Got over to her apartment. I said, where in the hell is security? So we were pushing buttons over there. Nobody's responding. Got on the radio. Nobody responds. I said, you have a MIB walking toward your apartment right now. She said, a MIB? I said, an ET. I said, they are dangerous, as you're well aware, but it's her first experience with something like this. I said, come here, look. It can't possibly, and I wanted to make sure that it wasn't walking back toward my apartment where the girls were. I said, it can't possibly have reached here by now. I mean, it's walking slowly. And so she came out with me, and she went over by the wall behind a bush, and she didn't see it initially. It was hidden like in the recesses of the light as it was walking up in one of the shadowed areas, because now the lights had kicked on the exterior of the buildings, all of that. And I walked up onto the sidewalk and saw it, and I turned my back on it at that point. They don't run. So I turned my back on it and I said, you may want to be going that way to Marcy. And she said, because she's not the faint of heart female, she said, why? And then she saw it over my shoulder and got her first laid her first eyes on an ET. And her eyes got about that big, which is the normal reaction. And she walked. Give you some credit. She actually walked from there back toward the corner of the building before I saw her break into something more than a walk. She walked away from it. By then, I'm still standing there, and this thing walked by me. Now I'm wondering why it's here. And I said, "Hi," and it turned this close to me and said, "Hello," and then just continued to walk. Walked right past me like I wasn't even there, toward her. I thought, well, okay, it has an assignment. We don't know what the assignment is because it will not give up its intention behaviorally before it carries out its assignment. And I wasn't sure if it was armed or what, so I walked by it again. This is how slow it is shuffling. It walks like it's got poop in its pants. I mean, that's how you can. I mean, they are clearly not comfortable in the skin. I walked by it again. Now I have made certain adjustments to the firearm I had on me because I was figuring that whatever was going to happen, it was going to happen fairly soon. And if it pulled a weapon out, I was going to do what I learned in the police department and do it well for probation. Got back to her, got all the way into her apartment, locked the door. I then said, "You go get your gun. If it pulls a weapon out, you've been a former cop too, do what you do, and do it well." By that time, we were both shaking, figuring, it was going to turn into something very bad. It sat down on the stairway outside of her apartment, and it had a bag with it. It was a black bag of some sort, and I didn't know what was in it. It could have been anything. And it just sat there. And then it got up, and it walked past her apartment. And now I'm looking at her like, what the hell is this? Still no security. Finally, after it had made its way all the way to the basketball court area, and stood there and looked around, still confused. Security came up with its weapons drawn and took it into custody. Put it in one of the vans, and off it went. They cuffed it, like a human being would be cuffed, and they took it. She got a couple photographs off. We actually, because it walked down toward the court, I was looking through the window and said, well, there's no way it could hit us from here, even if it does have a gun on it or whatever. She stepped out onto her porch and she took a couple photographs. It was a disposable.
I found a disposable camera. It was up on the bookshelf near the door, and I just
disposable.
grabbed it, and that's all I had.
She took a couple photographs of it, and we have since made those public on the Eagles Disobey forum. Those are real. It's the real McCoy. The best I could do, the enhancements that show one after another with it, bringing it out from the background. Those are the best enhancements I could do, because the original photographs that we put up there too, you saw, it was just basically jet black. There was no carrying of the flash, and it was not set for night speed or anything like that. It was an indoor-outdoor type daytime camera, a disposable camera, but it was all that was available. Now, security took photographs and all of that, but they don't share them.
Right.
At the same time, I was doing my weekly reports, and I detailed it in my weekly report, and I allowed that weekly report to be made available too, where I said, the MIB was taken into custody and no one was injured. But he just walked onto her property. Assignment, still to this day, unknown. Well, following 20 years of service for the Majestic, last October the 12th, which was October the 12th, 2005, I was dismissed at the time of their adjournment to complete a final set of orders, if you will, to present the information which I had learned over the last 20 years concerning the extraterrestrial intelligences to the world or to whomever wanted to hear. For the last year's time, we have been committed to a debriefing of my service since 1986, and even actually before that, we've arranged to speaking about my early life as well. We're hoping that within a short period of time, DVDs will be completed and this will be presented, and this will then conclude my service to Majestic with a very big relief, and thank God. Right now, we are presently in the middle of several different projects, inclusive of which is Project Lotus, which has basically been dispatched and dismissed to me after the years of service as well. This
Meaning
project,
it was turned over to you?
well, it's been turned over. I don't think that the folks from the former Majestic are continuing to research it all. I really don't think that they want anything to do with it after the problems that we've had and associated problems at a couple different facilities involving, we'll say, extraneous energy emissions around the project. Which have caused some damage to their equipment.
Well, to back up a tiny bit, could you tell us what is Project Lotus?
Sure. In May of 2001, we traveled to Frenchman Mountain here in Nevada to begin a real project looking for a biomarker for a possible precursor virus. It was a rather prosaic study looking for evidence for panspermia. During the course of that initial investigation, we came across some anomalous activity in some of our data sets. That anomalous activity was ultimately tracked down to very unusual electromagnetic activity associated with silicon oxides. And we have since tracked that anomalous activity to any silicon oxides present in minerals. To wit, the activity is the presence of an emission of electromagnetic bundles containing information. We are presently attempting to further define the nature of that electromagnetic anomalous activity. But we have, in fact, determined that the activity is associated with cells within the terrestrial environment, and that they have effects upon cells in our terrestrial environment, up to and including modifying the genetic material of extant cells in our environment.
Are you saying living cells?
Yes. We have, together with these electromagnetic emissions that we have defined with relative precision to date to be specific varieties of what we termed as particles. We had to call them something. They're bundles of electromagnetic material, confined discrete bundles, that we believe are possibly related to as far back as the ancient Pavitrakas of the Hindus, subtle matter particles, which could be imparted into our environment and affect changes. Thus far, we have not observed negative changes, meaning the effects of these subtle matter particles, if you will, have not affected our environment negatively.
But you have had interruptions as a result of those particles.
Well, we've had
anomalous activity, you said.
We've had anomalous thermal emissions when too much or too little energy was imparted to the silicon oxide bearing material. We have had unusual drains of batteries around the activity. and have not defined why. But there have been two phenomena associated with lotus that have been particularly striking to me as a biologist. We've had resets of cells which have occurred, and I say resets because I'm trying not to make it sound Frankenstein-like, where there have been heat-fixed yeast cells which have been used as offered, if you will, to this phenomenon as target cells. And upon the receipt of material of these dead heat-fixed yeast cells, we've had a restart of the cells, and we have the photographic and the...
So they've come back to life, is what you're saying, as a result of this.
There has been
energy.
Yes. I really don't even like using those terms. It's out of the book, off the edge of the pizza, so to speak. But we have had a restart of the cells in that location. However, the cells which have restarted from the dead cells are not the same cells, are not the same functioning cells as the precursor cells, the precursor yeast cells. We don't really know what they are.
You mean, are you saying that the cells changed and they're functioning differently after being exposed to this energy?
Yes, we started out with essentially a fungal cell, a budding yeast cell, which we heat fixed, and the result was more termed what one would normally term an animal-like cell.
Really? So it actually changed it from one thing. It actually transformed it from one thing to another.
It transformed it from one thing to another after imparting to it what we've come to call a template. There is an actual imparting of DNA to the cell. So we're receiving DNA essentially across some sort of an electromagnetic barrier through these what we call portals, these emissions of electromagnetic energy that then impart further discrete bundles of electromagnetism to our environment.
So
we're attempting to understand it. We don't understand what we are truly looking at the moment. We've not fully defined the lotus as a system.
Okay, but are the particles, are these the Ganesh particles that are coming through?
We've defined three basic discrete varieties of particles that we have termed alpha, beta, and C-type particles. The A-type particles were nicknamed Ganesh particles, and that's what they are. They're nicknames. We had to call them something, so we called them Ganesh particles out of a historical deference, if you will, for the mover of obstacles. And we called the portals Shiva portals, as an opening or a changing. These are the admission or emission centers, if you will, for these Ganesh particles. And then we have still another variety of particle, which we call Selkies, and Marcia actually named them. These are C-type particles, and they basically act as almost like crossing guards, which line the periphery of an electromagnetic stream that leaves these portals, and basically act as guards or guideways surrounding the Ganesh particles, giving them a pathway to a target. Now, the real question, I think, is how is the decision being made for a target? And we've identified on these Selkies what appear to be acoustic antennae. And I say appear to be acoustic antennae because changes of input into this system, acoustic changes, affect the behavior of these Selkie particles.
Sound. In other words,
Yes.
sound is affecting the Selkie particles, causing them to redirect the energy towards a target or away from a target?
Causing them to redirect their positions, which confine an electromagnetic stream or a river, if you will, being emitted from these portals. And we've wondered what the portals are. They might be micro wormholes.
Okay.
We don't know right now.
And,
sure.
and these are nano-sized portals? Is that
No,
what you said?
these are microscopic sized, somewhere within the 20 to well, it'd be very transient, up to 50, but around the 10 to 20 micrometer size. And so they're observable quite readily under a compound microscope if the conditions are held constant and if they are treated delicately. They're extremely transient phenomena.
In other words, you don't have a control over them.
No. And in fact, we don't do any direct propagations anymore. The last direct propagation was done last November, and we received for the second time an anomalous growth of cells in the medium surrounding the crystal that we were using. We were using a quartz crystal because of the silicon oxide nature of the quartz crystal. And we received an anomalous growth of cells of unknown origin around the crystal. So we do not know where these cells were from. We've had that happen now twice, and we've determined that we're getting a little too good, if you will, at the science of propagating these portals, and we're possibly receiving a negative consequence as a result.
In other words, those could actually be an alien life form.
Indeed.
Okay.
Indeed, they could.
Very interesting.
They could be extraterrestrial.
Cells. They're microscopic,
cells,
right? So.
Right. I mean, we've received a mix of very unusual cells, which I was not able to cytologically type, and also cells which appeared nearly prosaic to our ocean here. Microscopic one-celled organisms, haptophytes.
But they came out of nowhere.
The material that we had provided to the experiment prohibited a cross-contamination, the ability for this to have been a cross-contamination. So they came from somewhere. Now, also, what we've done is a repeat of a very famous experiment called the Spallanzani experiment with beef broth, but we put a tweak on it, if you will. In the Spallanzani experiments were experiments designed to either prove or disprove the idea of spontaneous generation. And so the question is then begged, are we exhibiting spontaneous generation here? And I think that we have zero evidence that this is spontaneous generation.